Clear ice versus regular ice. Does it really make a difference? Let's find out today. Stick around. Fellas, welcome back. It's Robert, your everyday gentleman. So is there really a difference between using clear ice and the standard ice that you get from your freezer? Well, there's actually a number of differences aside from the obvious appearance of the ice. Some of these may surprise you. I know they did to me. Also, make sure you stick around to the end because I'm going to show you what I think is the easiest way to make clear ice. But before we start freezing, if this is your first time to this channel, I want to welcome you. If you're interested not only in how to make clear ice, but also things like men's style, fragrances, grooming, fitness, whiskey, cigars, and other topics for the everyday man, then this might be the place for you. Consider subscribing and joining the growing EG family. And if you're already a member, I want to thank you for your continued support. And without further delay, let's check out the ice. All right, now before we start comparing the ice, it's important to know why one is clear and one is frosty. Now the main reason is that when standard ice freezes, impurities and oxygen and minerals freeze inside of the cube, and that's what creates that discoloration, that white look, that frosty look that ice has. Now this doesn't mean that you can just take purified drinking water and then freeze that and end up with clear ice, because even though you may not have as many impurities, you could still end up with some oxygen and air bubbles in that ice. Clear ice happens when the freezing is done in a way where the impurities are actually pushed out of the water, and what they leave behind is ice that's crystal clear. I'll get more into the process later, but for now, let's talk about the first difference, which is the aesthetics. Okay, obviously the way that a drink looks doesn't really do anything other than satisfy your visual senses and then maybe make for some cool Instagram pics. And one thing I will say, there's definitely some people out there that think it's evil to drink whiskey on the rocks. To that I say, if you bought your own whiskey, drink it however you want. I drink whiskey a variety of ways, either in an old fashioned, sometimes on the rocks, and sometimes neat. And even some would say that the way that I drink whiskey neat would be considered fake because I actually add a little bit of water to my whiskey. But like I said, the right way to drink whiskey is whatever way you like it. Anyway, back to the ice. Visually, things are appealing primarily to your eyes, but this does also carry into some of your other senses. For example, my wife and I always get a craving for a Coke when we see that concessions ad pop up anytime we go to the movies. Man, that always looks so refreshing. And honestly, the reason that I think it does that is because that ice is clear. I just don't think I would get that same feeling if the ice was cloudy. So the better option visually is clearly clear ice. Now, let's talk about taste. Now, because clear ice is supposed to be free of impurities, theoretically, it shouldn't do much to change the flavor of your drink. Of course, that chill that you get when you add ice to a drink is gonna happen regardless of whichever type of ice you go with, but that's probably why you're adding the ice into the drink to help soften the taste. Standard ice, however, does have all those impurities and all those minerals inside of it, so as the ice begins to melt, inevitably it's gonna alter the flavor of your drink. When it comes to taste, again, the winner is gonna be clear ice. Now the last thing that we're gonna look at is the melting factor. Now it's said that clear ice is superior to standard ice because it melts slower, which means your drink won't water down as quickly. So I conducted an experiment and I filmed both types of ice side by side to see which one melted faster. Obviously both melted, but there was still a good amount of clear ice after the standard ice was gone. The winner here again is clear ice. Now it seems that clear ice is the better way to go, so the question is, why don't you always use clear ice as opposed to standard ice? Simply put, clear ice is harder to make. For standard ice, all you need to do is take some water, put it into a tray or to a mold, put it in the freezer for a few hours and you're good to go. And of course, you can get molds that are shaped like spheres or like cubes, so you have the perfect size that goes into your tumbler. Clear ice, however, requires a special technique called directional freezing. Essentially what's happening is, instead of freezing the water from all sides like you do with standard ice, you're actually going to be freezing from the top down. This process then causes the air and the impurities in the water to be pushed down, leaving a nice clean layer up on top. Now because you are freezing water from only one side, freezing typically takes longer than when you're making standard ice. Typically for clear ice, it'll take me anywhere from 24 to 26 hours, while standard ice, depending on the size of the cube, is really only going to be like 4 or 5 hours. Now the water doesn't need to be anything special, it doesn't need to be boiled or anything like that. But I do prefer to use purified drinking water just because it already has less impurities to begin with. Now, I did freeze both tap water and purified water side by side in the same method, so you can see that both generate clear ice, although one is clearer than the other. Now, there's a few different ways that I've tried to make clear ice. The way that makes the most ice at one time is by using a small cooler like this one. Now, since the sides and the bottom of the cooler are insulated, you remove the top, and that's what's going to allow the water to freeze from the top down. Now, this method gets you a nice thick chunk of clear ice up on top, but what I hated about it was that you have to take that and then carve it into smaller chunks. And in my experience of doing it around 5 or 6 times, I more often than not ended up with crooked edges and, you know, pieces that were supposed to be square, but it ended up looking like some weird shape. So it was difficult for me to get nice square cubes to put into my drink, and then forget about making spheres. That was pretty much impossible. So instead, this is my preferred way of making clear ice. I actually ended up buying these inexpensive clear ice makers from Amazon, and I've loved using them. The unit has a plastic tray that sits inside the insulated bottom. You then have silicone molds that allow you to make shapes like cubes or spheres. You simply fill the tray up with water till it's just about an inch below the top, and then you take the silicone mold and slowly slide that into the plastic tray, and that creates a very tight fit. And then the silicone allows the freezing temperatures to get down into the water and creates that directional freezing. Now, after that top layer freezes, which like I said takes about 24 to 26 hours, you take that silicone mold out, and presto, you have clear ice cubes or spheres. Now, this does have a downside, being that you can only make 2 ice cubes at once. In comparison, when you do the cooler method, this usually gets you about 12 pieces of ice that you can put into your drinks. Like I said, for me, the biggest pain is that you have to actually carve it down to those cubes. Now, I purchased 2 of these. One is for cubes and one's for spheres. And so essentially I can make 4 at any one time. And if I need to create a stock, then what I'll do is I'll just have them running for a few days, and then I'll take the ice and put it in a Ziploc and keep it in the freezer until it's ready for use. Now, if you're interested in checking these out, I'll put the links down below. I'll tell you though, excuse me for a second. An old-fashioned looks so nice with a clear ice cube in it. Now, as always, if you found value in this video, make sure you let me and YouTube know by hitting that like button. Subscribe, turn on notifications, share the video, and do all the things that help the channel continue to grow. And remember, being a gentleman is an everyday thing. Cheers, fellas.
We bop and hippity hop, I'm as happy as I can be.